Greetings, everyone. Michael Rosso here, Film Photography Podcast. It's a great day for film shooters, and I'm going to share it today with Mr. Trev Lee, Director of Marketing at thedarkroom.com. No stranger to folks here who watch and listen to the FPP. Hi, Trev.
How's it going, Mike?
Pentax is releasing a brand new 35 millimeter half frame camera called the Pentax 17.
Right here.
And you are one of the luckiest people on the planet. You were able to get a camera to shoot, which is
Yeah,
very exciting.
yeah, it is. I've had it, I think now over a month.
What is this camera? What is this new camera?
I think there's two important things to know about it. One, it's a zone focus camera, and two, it's a half frame camera.
Now, really quick,
Um,
for people who don't know, when you say zone focus, what does that mean exactly?
there's multiple different types. If there's manual focus for like say a rangefinder, or manual focus for a SLR, you are seeing feedback in the viewfinder of if you're in or out of focus. With a zone focus camera, you do not see that feedback. You basically are taking an educated guess, unless you're actually using a ruler or measuring tape, then it's not educated. But you are guessing the distance and then adjusting that on the lens itself. So, say you think that your subject is 4 feet away, then you'd put it on 4 feet. And this camera has the little logo, like the little icons on the front
Oh,
that represent macro and just the different distances all the way out to a mountain, which is
oh,
infinity.
one
But
bloke, two blokes,
yeah, but
mountain.
simultaneously it shows it in feet as well as meters. So if
Okay.
you select the icon of two people, you look down here and it shows that's 5.5 feet, or 1.7 meters. I always look at feet just
Right.
because that's what I use. And then half frame, 35 millimeter film, but only half of the frame is being exposed. Therefore, you get 72 frames, photos per roll on a 36 exposure roll. When I heard about the camera and Pentax contacted us and was like, would you want to test it out? I was obviously excited about it, but I was a little skeptical in the sense that it was half frame because my experience with half frame hasn't always been the best. I've shot with a lot of the modern day half frame cameras are just plastic lenses that don't produce great results, even as 35 millimeter, let alone half frame, because you're only getting half the resolution. And then zone focus, which I've done before, but I didn't really, it wasn't that I wasn't excited, but I also wasn't super overly excited to get the camera. And then I got it and I started shooting with it, and it's a really fun camera to shoot with. An easy camera to use, and halfway through the first roll, I had the hang of zone focusing, and it was kind of like secondhand nature. And to kind of show you the camera, so it has exposure compensation, which is a really cool thing for a camera like this, and auto mode. And the auto mode will use the flash if it needs it and won't use it if it doesn't need it. And then program mode, there's a program mode right here that shows program, a night mode, and bokeh and bulb. The program mode in a non-flash, which is the white, it won't use the flash. The program mode will give you a long exposure up to 4 seconds. The bokeh mode will make it shoot at its widest aperture, which is 3.5, therefore giving you, a more shallow depth of field, hence bokeh. And then the bulb mode is long exposure, you just hold it. And then if you want a flash, it has that for night mode as well as program mode. So I rarely use the auto mode. If I wanted flash, I put it on the flash modes. And if I didn't want flash, then I shot it without it.
What
Uh,
mode were you generally shooting with on the street? Like, what mode do you keep it in?
Program.
Program. Okay.
Yeah. Since it's a half frame camera, something that's also different about it is that the viewfinder is vertical.
Right.
So, when I'm taking a photo like this, it's actually vertical. If I want horizontal, I go like that,
Right.
which is a fun experience. I actually like shooting vertical often. So this it worked out really well for me. And I know I shared some results with you. When I first tested it, Phil from the dark room was asking me like, "How do you like it?" I'm like, "Well, I love the experience of shooting with it, but I don't. We'll see how I like it once I see the results." And the only thing that was more surprising than using the camera was the results. The results were very good. Really excited, really happy with the results. And I thought at best this would be more of a companion camera where like I would bring it alongside of another camera, like maybe I'm shooting with a Pentax 6.7 or whatever, and this would be my second camera that I just bring along with me for candids. But it was good enough that it's something that I would only bring this camera.
For a camera to be your main camera, it has to be somewhat special.
For me, it's a perfect fit. It has a 25 millimeter lens, and that is the equivalent of a 37 millimeter equivalent for half frame. So I feel like it's a really usable focal length. I love 40 millimeters. This is kind of right in between 35 and 40. So it worked well for portraits, candids, landscapes, street photography, everything. I think it's the only camera I've ever seen that says film camera. Like it
That's
says film
hilarious.
camera on it. It has the same advance lever as a Pentax Auto 110.
Oh, interesting.
It has the same, and I just happen to have these. A friend of mine gave me this camera. It happens to have the exact same lens as the Ricoh Auto half, just with modern day coatings, which make a big difference. I've shot like direct sunlight hitting the front element of this lens with very little, if any, flare. And then it takes some design from the Spotmatic as well. With it has the same arrow on the rewind knob. The rewind knob is the same thing from a Pentax LX, which I don't have. And then that AOG logo right there, it has on the top of the camera as well. And then the only other design cue that it has is that 17 is the same font from a Pentax 6.7,
Interesting.
which is cool. We got to hear all about it from TKO, who's from Pentax and designed this camera. We went out to New York City. I shot mainly black and white through this camera. Got to meet the guy who designed it. It was really cool. It's been a fun camera to shoot with. Also, one other thing I didn't mention is if you're shooting in macro mode, the macro mode will work in every mode other than auto, just so people know. And this is the distance of the macro.
Amazing. And did you shoot any macro shots?
I did. Yeah, I did shoot a few shots with it. I will say the macro is the hardest thing to get right, like to nail focus, because the closer you get, the more shallow the depth of field naturally will be. So if you do macro, one, you want good light. You can use the flash, which is helpful. But with macro, you just got to be careful that you're not you're so close that if, say it's a sunny day and you're photographing flower, you could literally have your shadow in the photo, but since you're not seeing through the lens, you're seeing
Right.
through the viewfinder, you might not notice it. So that's something to think about. Another thing is the viewfinder. When you're looking through the viewfinder, you can see the focus mode at the bottom. There's two frame lines, one for a normal and then a smaller one for macro. And it has two lights. It has a light if there's like, this is how you turn it on and off. So say you have it on, you're going to take a photo and you go to take a photo and you have it advanced it. There'll be a light that blinks. And then there's also a light that blinks if you need a flash, like if there's low light or if your lens cap is on.
And do you recall what kind of batteries are in there?
It takes a CR2 maybe, I
Okay,
believe.
it senses DX code. Would you happen to know like what the lowest ISO will take?
It doesn't sense DX code. You select it manually right here.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah.
What's the lowest?
So it goes from 50 all the way to 3200 ISO. Right now I have T-Max P3200 that I'm shooting. I've shot 100, 200, 160, 400, 800, and now 3200 ISO. And I haven't got the results from this, but the results that I've got from all the other ones are just really good. Even the Cine Still 800T look good, which is, more noticeable grain. The grain is a little bit more noticeable on these photos because it's a half frame, but if you expose it well, it looks good. And when I was testing out the camera, I bracketed a lot of the scenes just to see how good the meter was. And for the most part, I would say 95% of the photos that I chose were the ones I shot at no exposure compensation, meaning that the meter works really well. So
Okay.
I've shot a lot in it because we want to kind of give people a good idea of what film may look like in it, and what would perform best. I recommend 200 ISO. I feel like that's like the sweet spot.
Right.
Um, it is a camera that picks its shutter speed and aperture for you.
Right.
So during the daylight, like if you have bright light, it's going to be shooting at a higher aperture, like f8 or f11, somewhere around there, which makes it a lot more forgiving when it comes to focus. So when I was outdoor shooting, I shot at 10 feet a lot. And when it comes to like focusing, when I'm outdoors, like say when I was in New York City, I kept it on infinity, which is the mountains. And then I just knew off the top of my head, like one click over is 10 feet, another click is 5.5, and the next one is 4. So I didn't even look. And I took some photos of this guy walking, and I didn't have to like go up here and focus. I just knew that he was around 5.5 feet. So I just went 3 clicks over and was shooting from the hip,
Right.
took some photos, and they're some of my favorite photos. Zone focus is overlooked for how efficient it can be, and overlooked by me because, like, say I was taking a portrait of you across from me in low light, there's like some side light. I have some nice point and shoot cameras that will sometimes focus on the background or miss focus, or hunt for focus for a while. Where if you're 4 feet away from me, I just set it, and you know let's see,
Right.
set it up, and I just take the photo, and we're good to go. Take the photo. You got to hear the shutter. It's really quiet. See if you can hear it.
Didn't hear it at all.
Yeah, it's super quiet.
That's great. That's great.
Um, so yeah, and the meter is right there on the front.
Right.
So it's not metering through the lens. Two things to consider with this camera is I got a UV filter to put
Okay.
right here
Yep.
for protection if it's raining or when I was around sand because I went to the beach with it, because this is open. So I
Yep.
was just kind of worried that like sand or water could get in there. You might not want to put a ND or a really big filter because it might block that sensor.
Right.
So I just did that, and then the other thing is that it does have night mode and a bulb mode, but it doesn't have a self timer.
Okay.
So you can't do a self timer for that, like set it up and do a long exposure, and it doesn't have a mechanical shutter release. So the one thing you will need to buy is if you want to do long exposures is they have electronic shutter release. I bought it for like 15 bucks online. And then build wise, this is like a magnesium alloy. So this is like a metal on the top and the bottom. This is plastic, but I haven't had any issues. It's really light, and I think some people might be like, "Oh, it feels like plasticky," but I think like for instance, you and I like the Canon Rebels.
Oh, yes.
That's a plastic camera, and if I took my Nikon F3 and my plastic Canon Rebel and I dropped them 4 feet, which I never want to do, I have a feeling that the Rebel would still work.
Right.
It would just bounce.
Right.
Where like if I dropped my Nikon F3, that thing would put a dent and it probably wouldn't work.
What's your overall feel about it, and like what's your recommendation level?
I think it's gonna do well. I think people are really gonna like it. For in the film community, we've wanted we've been lucky enough to have film come back, like be resurrected or brought back, or brand new film be like produced, and everyone's been wanting cameras. And you know, the only cameras that have been prior to this available are either incredibly expensive and are really good, or very cheap, but also cheaply made and not as versatile as this camera, which so I feel like this camera is a nice in between. It's very good, but not extremely expensive. So I feel like it will do well, and there will be a learning curve for some people to get used to zone focusing.
Right.
But I think it will be, at first it'll be nice because it'll slow people down and make them think. But eventually, once you get the hang of it, it's actually really fast.
Yeah.
Because you're just, and it's a good thing to learn when shooting with a manual focus camera, because sometimes zone focusing is more ideal for candids, street
Right.
photography, like presetting your focus and stuff. So,
Well, we have been kind of preaching here at the FPP since the get-go, which is get to know your camera. As you mentioned, I mean, you've been shooting with it a lot, and you already know on the street how to shoot from the hip, so to speak, of where to set your focus, and that is achieved by the fact that you know your camera and you're aware of what its functions are. And kind of that's how you master your craft as far as I'm concerned, especially with street photography. So,
mhm.
uh we encourage everyone to, like, dig in, but then, like, shoot with the camera for a few months so you can really get to, get used to it and get used to all settings. So I
Yeah, and
think
when you shoot it,
yeah,
you have
okay.
72 frames, so
Oh,
you have more space to mess up and learn.
yeah.
Like, I
So
think, yeah,
36 exposure roll is 72 frames because it's taking that 35 millimeter frame and cutting it in half, so to speak, into a vertical, unless you
that's where
turn the
they got the
camera the other way.
17.
What's that?
That's where the 17 comes from. It's a 17 millimeters.
Oh, gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. And of
Uh,
course, what does 24 give you? 40, 48.
yep,
48. Do you think there'll be a comeback for 12 exposure rolls of film?
no.
I
You would
don't
know
either.
better than me, but I don't think
Yeah,
so.
no, I don't think so. So, well,
Yeah,
good.
it does take a while to get through a roll, which for some people love that, and for other people they might not. On your first roll, I would recommend one. I think color is really good for this camera. 200 ISO, I think, is the sweet spot. And when you shoot your first roll, if you think something's infinity, shoot it at infinity and shoot it at 10 feet and kind of get a feel for it, what you might like. Because say something is an infinity, but there's stuff in the foreground, like say you're photographing an actual mountain, but there's flowers in the foreground.
Right,
It might be best to shoot at 10 feet, and because this thing's going to be shooting at a high aperture or a low aperture like f8 or f11, so it'll focus on the foreground but still have the background in focus. So it's, kind of learning how to, like, what works best for your style and what you like. And then once you get that first rollback, you get a good idea of like how the camera works best for you.
right, right, right. And of course, we're gonna say, hey, thedarkroom.com, easy to order, easy to get developing scan and prints.
Hmm.
And for an upcoming segment, we're going to start to be talking about prints again because, in the digital world, you know, I feel at least sometimes people kind of forget to, the joy of making prints of your photographs.
Yeah, what I did is, we develop and scan and print half frame film at the darkroom, and actually we partnered with Pentax.
In the last 2 years, the whole half concept of half frame has really, really come back with so many of the Kodak, like the H35 and whatnot. So is
Mhm.
the darkroom now set up to do half frame?
Yeah, it's something that we've been gearing up for. I mean, we already did a good amount of it, but with this camera, we actually worked around and kind of changed our pricing and ordering. We now offer one up or two up, meaning that you can either get the film scanned individually or side by side. So a 35 millimeter frame, but with both of the half frame images. Um, the advantage of a single frame is that you get the full resolution compared to if you get the scan for two side by side, you're splitting that resolution.
Right, 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 right.
Um, it is kind of cool to see. A lot of people like telling a story with them side by side. And then we do offer prints. I would recommend, since there's so many frames on here, it's what I have been doing when it comes to ordering prints is getting my scans and then choosing what photos I like, and then later on going back and ordering prints for my favorites. Because I've found 72 prints is a lot, like, and there ends up being a lot that I might not want.
Right,
I'll kind of go back later and order from our app or our website and just order the prints directly.
right. Have we missed anything regarding the camera besides the fact that it's awesome that there's a new Pentax camera?
I don't think so. I mean, it has a nice grip. You hold it well. I just keep it like this most of the time. You can put a strap here so you can have a traditional one, or there's a strap hook up here so you can have it like that.
Yep,
Um, I don't have the lens cap with me, but it has a lens cap and whatnot. And another thing that's unique about it is that it has the film rebate, like the little slip here.
yep,
Is this hasn't been a thing, I think, since probably early 90s. Because right around in the early 90s, they started adding a film window
yep.
right here. So you could just see the film. Now this is there, which is, I think, kind of a fun throwback because obviously they probably could have put a film window here. But I feel like this is just a fun little touch to make
Yeah,
it
no,
feel
absolutely.
analog.
So folks should know that the film photography project, our film photography project store, we're going to be carrying this camera. So you can purchase this camera from the FPP. That's new and exciting for us. We're thrilled to be offering it.
But yeah, it's a fun camera. I think it's going to be received well, and it's really cool. I think if it does, it would be cool to see what Pentax does next. I have no idea what that might be. Um, but I have a feeling if this does well, they'll keep making them and hopefully make different variations or other cameras. It'll be really cool to see
Yeah.
what could happen and maybe encourage other camera companies to do the same.
Okay. Well, that's it, folks. Some exciting news today. Trev, thrilled to have you.
Yeah, great
And
talking.
I'm sure we'll have you back real soon. And I want to thank everyone for joining us.
Awesome. Great talking to you, man.